Falcom just delivered a near-perfect remake of the Trails series Origins from back on the PSP. Let's dive right back into the Bracer Guild. Here is my review of Trails in the Sky First Chapter for Nintendo Switch, as well as Switch 2 Edition. Let's start by saying Trails in the Sky is the best place to start in the series. Switch has access to a lot of these games, from Cold Steel and Azure to Zero and Daybreak. They're all interconnected stories in the same world, and all casually spoil the previous games. The Sky Trilogy is the start, so any newcomer intimidated by all of these 50 to 60 hour RPGs can safely come in here with no prior knowledge. This game is about Estelle and Joshua Bright, training to become bracers to be able to help their country in a sort of halfway point between civilians and military. But when their father goes missing, they go on a journey to find him and become senior bracers. You should also expect longer cutscenes. This series is very story heavy and does a lot of development not only for the characters of the game itself, but setting up the world of the subsequent series like Cold Steel. And the story itself is pretty good. Estelle's naive and outburst-heavy nature can get a little repetitive and annoying during serious conversations later on in the story, but overall it's well written. The original translation is mostly intact here as well. Many parts of it have been reworded, like what you're seeing here from Duke Dunnan speaking about spending money, but it all still means the same thing it always did. Though voice acting is a little weird. Some cutscenes are fully voiced in English, others have no voices at all like the original on PSP, and a few odd scenes will have one-sided conversations, with Estelle and Joshua's dialogue remaining silent while the person talking to them is voiced. A final note to remember is that this is part 1 of a trilogy. The finale sets up and goes right into Trails in the Sky's second chapter. While the original second chapter is still available on Steam and is an excellent continuation, we will be waiting a bit to get it in remake form. With gameplay, this is a mostly linear turn-based RPG with a few action elements thrown in here and there. Now, as a remake of a 2D RPG from back on the PSP 21 years ago, a lot of things were enhanced and changed. The world has been completely remade in 3D, with every story scene now being cinematic and everything just looking bigger. Despite the bigger look of the world, it's still a hub-based linear RPG. Each chapter gives you a new region of the country to explore, having you around a town or two with a few roads and dungeons in the surrounding areas. There are side quests to do for increasing your bracer rank, but this isn't a giant open world game like you might think based on how big the world seems to look in the new graphical style. The biggest change is combat, giving Sky a combat style similar to the Trails Through Daybreak games, where you can attack enemies in real time on the field and then toggle into the more traditional turn-based mechanics. Though it is worth noting that all boss fights default to the turn-based style, and the turn order is much easier to understand here than it was in Daybreak. This is something that I really like. Instead of using a command to move around a grid, you can freely move around the arena on your turn, and your magic and craft skills have ranges that you can use to position enemies together. It's a little more advanced, but it gives me Neptunia Rebirth vibes. They also added a high speed mode feature, allowing you to run the game at a much faster pace if the combat is too slow for you, or if you want to grind or get to a new place faster. But what really makes the combat shine is how much work was put into it. Every spell, craft, and ultimate you use is cinematic. They're all beautiful shots of Joshua jumping forward with his blades, or Shara side-eyeing someone she's about to teach a lesson to with her whip. Not only do we have different animations for the same skills to make them feel less repetitive, but they are accurate recreations of the same animations from the original PSP game, all the way up to Estelle's run up and spin with her pommel S-craft. The difficulty was also very faithful. While you don't really ever need to grind in these games, tactics and fighting smart are an absolute must, as this is a series not known for being a casual button masher. When I first live streamed this game on the normal difficulty, I got destroyed by Josette on my first attempt. The game reminding me that you can't just button mash through major bosses. You have to come prepared with CP maxed out, items for status ailments, and a plan to buff and throw out S-crafts immediately to give yourself an advantage. All in all, I find the gameplay loop to be a lot of fun. Constantly swapping locations and what party members are with you helps it not feel too repetitive, and as I was going through, it still feels like like Trails in the Sky, but it also feels new at the same time. That brings us to content and length, and Trails is always a huge time sink. I ended up doing around 2 to 3/4 of the available side quests, landed Bracer rank 3 at the end, and completed the game in around 46 hours total. That is also with a very generous use of high speed mode for roaming dungeons and the later boss fights. Even if you only do the main story and touch 0 side quests, the game will still easily take you 40 hours. Next up is presentation. Visually on Switch 1, the game looks pretty good, but not phenomenal. When you're running around the field, you can see a lot of fuzzy bits and jaggies around the character models, like we see here on Shera's Bang out in Mistwald. And when we swap to Switch 2 edition, it looks a lot better. Little to no jaggies, and the depth and detail just looks so pretty in motion. And pretty is what I would call this game overall. When I first booted this game up on the Switch 2 and I started playing it, I was just floored by how gorgeous it was. Next is performance, which is going to be a 3-part comparison. We're going to show the Switch 1 version running on Switch 1 hardware, the Switch 1 version on Switch 2 via backwards compatibility, and the Nintendo Switch 2 edition. They all have weird little hiccups, and they're all different. Switch 1 is a bit all over the place. The frame rate is unlocked, but it will struggle to stay 30 to 60 when you're running around and fighting. Here in Mistwald, we get a lot of little dips when jumping into battle, and slowdown when enemy animations are going through. It's plenty playable, especially since this is a turn-based RPG, but not consistently smooth. Next is the Switch 1 version running on Switch 2 via backwards compatibility. In docked mode, the game runs at 60 FPS for a lot. Big open areas pretty much stay at 60, but has frame dips within dungeons and camera panning during cutscenes, something Falcom has struggled with on handheld since Trails of Cold Steel on the PS Vita. More importantly, if you're running it on backwards compatibility, the frame rate will often be inconsistent between 30 and 60 in handheld mode specifically. Then there's the Switch 2 edition. This one looks significantly better and plays at 60 FPS in both docked and handheld modes, though the frame rate does hiccup a fair bit when you're walking around the world. Never large dips, just small stutters here and there. They don't get consistent outside of very specific buildings like the inside of airships. And of course, the cutscene panning is still a little jumpy. Interestingly, the Switch 1 version on backwards compatibility does not have those wandering the world hiccups, though the inside building frame drops are significantly worse. With this in mind, the Switch 2 edition is still the best way to go here. You get occasional stutters, but it's 60 FPS and is the best overall experience. That brings us to battery life. Trails in the Sky First Chapter will give the original and light models a battery range of about 2 to 3 hours. The V2 and OLED models get 5 to 5.5 hours, and the Switch 2 will get 2 hours and 35 minutes. In conclusion, the first Trails in the Sky has returned to the gaming and handheld worlds in an absolutely gorgeous remake with a huge amount of detail, in not only revamping the experience for modern Trails fans, but making it as authentic to the original as they could. Now the downside, there will be performance stutters from time to time, even with the Switch 2 edition. But if you can deal with the stutters and a large emphasis on story and lore, it is a really good RPG and a near perfect remake. Reviews to Go rates Trails in the Sky First Chapter for Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 a 9 out of 10. If you're interested in more JRPGs for the Switch, check out my Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 2 Switch import review. And if you like the content, subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next one.